everyone. Thank you for joining the Joint Committee work session of the Public Safety Committee and the Economic Development Committee. Today is Thursday, March 14th, 2024, and today we have one topic on our agenda. It's Bill 324, Late Night Establishments, Hours of Operation. As we start, I'd like to thank Ms. McCartney-Green for giving us a most informative packet. And as we begin, what I'm going to do is ask the co-chair of the chair of the Economic Development Committee and the co-chair for today, Councilmember Feeney Gonzalez, if she has any opening remarks. Then I'm going to turn to Vice President Stewart, who is one of the co-sponsors of the legislation, and ask Councilmembers Alvarez and Councilmember Glass if they have anything to add. Ask the joint committee members if they have anything to add. Then we're actually going to get to Ms. McCartney-Green, who's going to take us through the packet. But with that, Councilmember Feeney Gonzalez.
Thank you so much. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. This is about making sure the community is safe, that people can go out at night and spend money in Montgomery County, and do it in a not only for the people who are going out, but also for the employees, people who work in our community late at night, to make sure that they're safe. That's what I'm going to say. I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Vice President Stewart.
Great. Thank you so much, and I just want to particularly thank my colleagues, Councilmember Alvarez and Glass, for working on this, and Ms. McCartney-Green, thank you so much for your work as well. So our work on this has been over a year. When I first took office, the concerns about overnight and early morning activities in our downtown area was something that was raised by many residents as well as business owners. And we were asked to move forward and to change the times of businesses. At the time, I asked the residents and businesses who approached us about this to give us some time to engage with our businesses, with our police department, with our neighbors, to figure out if this was the solution that we needed. Over the past year, we have worked together with the county exec's office on public safety plans that are going to be coming online soon. We have held large events, such as the public safety event with Councilmember Glass last year, when we did a safety walk throughout the community. We've held so many meetings with business owners, including our overnight and early morning owners, our smaller business owners, the chambers, including the Ethio-American Chamber, the Ethiopian Center, our Greater Silver Spring Chamber, condo associations of people who live in downtown Silver Spring, members of the Bonifant, and time again, we have come back to the need to restrict these overnight early morning activities in our downtown area. And I also want to thank our District 20 delegation for their support of this, and we're also working with their offices on this. And also thank Ms. Pena for the racial equity and social justice statement, and looking at this, because we spent a good deal of time working with the community, looking at how we can best address this situation. And I just want to thank everyone who had their input, and thank the two committees for their consideration of this today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Alvarez.
Thank you. I'll be very brief. I just want to extend my appreciation to the very thoughtful and methodical approach that Council District Member Stewart and Council Vice President Stewart took to this issue. She and her team did spend many hours engaging numerous stakeholders. And full disclosure, I wanted to do this 2 years ago, but it was a conversation with Councilmember Stewart that had me put the pause button to allow her the opportunity, particularly as the incoming district council member, to be able to engage and conduct due diligence. And it confirmed and verified what I sensed and what many others sensed several years ago. This is a challenge that's not going away. We don't have the infrastructure in place to be able to carry out these types of activities, and they are creating more problems than they are solving. And so I look forward to this discussion, but really just wanted to express publicly my appreciation to her and her team's leadership on this.
Thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the chair's effort and ability to schedule this work session before we got underway with the budget. I know that it was tricky coordinating 7 people's schedules the day that the budget does come out, which is now. But it is really important that, yes, you should high-five each other. But it is important that we have this conversation and that we move through this as expeditiously and thoughtfully as possible. And to the point that has been made, appreciate working with District Councilmember Vice President Stewart on this, and Councilmember Albernaz, and to pick up where he left off, we did have these conversations a number of years ago, and I'm glad we're at a place where there is more support for this, because the community never stopped asking for it. They have wanted this to make sure that our downtown areas are safer for everyone in the evening. And to drive home that point, over the past 2 years, the police beat covering most of downtown Silver Spring received nearly 3,000 calls for service between 2 a.m. and 7 a.m., the highest numbers across all of Montgomery County. That's what we're talking about here, making sure that we use our resources properly and make sure that all of our nighttime laws are applied fairly across all business establishments to ensure that our police department and our officers are deployed where they are most needed. And so I look forward to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other committee members want to jump in here? If not, as we begin, I did want to point out that we're pleased to have in the audience with us District 3 Silver Spring Station Commander McBain, as well as Captain Reed, and Dr. Earl Stoddard, the Assistant Chief Administrative Officer for the County Exec's Office. Ms. Ludine, Ludine, could you please lead us through this packet?
Thank you. And I will add to that list of attendees is Dr. Ashford, that's also here from the Office of Public Health.
Thank you. And I should have, excuse me.
It's okay. And so Bill 324 was introduced on February 13, 2024. Public hearing was held on March 5th, 2024. And the purpose of the bill is to set restrictions on operating hours for hookah lounges, tobacco shops, and vape shops, and establish penalties in violation if the operation continues after certain hours. The packet is heavily notated with, and I just want to go through the background a little bit and just set the stage. Just to be very clear, the state has primary jurisdiction over the sales of tobacco products and the licensure as well. But the county does have some authority when we talk about express powers and the ability to govern for the good. If there are reasons to protect public health and public safety. We did look at that there's a prior case in Baltimore County, Baddock versus Baltimore County, where there was a zoning ordinance that actually set very similar restriction, actually not similar, restricted hookah lounges to close at midnight. And so looking at that, that gave us a little bit of premise of where local authority was able to exercise its police powers that was related to public safety and public health. With that said, there's also other jurisdictions that have also aligned and have put restrictions on operating hours. In addition, this council has been proactive under Bill 1423, now Code Section 3513D, with the late night business safety plan, which also requires late night establishments to establish a safety plan and have that approved. And so council has been proactive with passing prior legislation. I do want to turn to the impact statements, and that's on page 3 of your staff report. Climate assessment this bill does not have any impact on the county's contribution to climate change. The economic impact statement that's provided did come back and said there was a negative impact on economic conditions relating to the obviously reduced hours. And so the question is how much, or was that attainable in terms of calculating the dollar amount of what that would be? And that was hard to do just because that data is not readily available. And some of that information is actually proprietary depending on the business and what their those needs are. But what I did notice is looking at Baltimore County, because obviously their law's been in place since 2018, there was an owner that just reported that their business revenue starts at 10 p.m. And so just to keep that in mind of when is there a spike, that's just one basis just to use. Now moving on to the racial equity and social justice statement provided by OLO. That looked at the impact on owners, employees, patrons, and just the community overall, and did notice that there, yes, majority of the hookah lounges would have reduced hours. They were predominantly black-owned, but the benefit of the BIPOC community members likely outweighs the cost, coupled with the strong support for public safety to be reinforced. And so with that, the RESJ statement came in as a positive impact when balancing the needs of the community versus the needs of the business and the reduced hours. There was a recommendation that the committee should continue to monitor the impact of the reduced hours and to continue to look into that. Fiscal impact statement from OMB, there's no revenue, there's no increases to revenue. Public hearing, we had a lot of testimony, as the committee's already aware of that. I've just bucketed into 3 buckets that were largely heard of those themes: increase in several different types of crimes, whether it's homicide, excessive music, drug dealing, illegal food trucks, and a laundry list of things. The second most common theme was aligning and marrying the closing time for hookah lounges and vape and tobacco shops with other late night establishments, for example, a restaurant or a bar. That was a common theme in the public testimony. And then lastly, to improve the safety and quality of life for residents, visitors, and workers. We received testimony from the Delegation 20 and some members that have signed on. That's in your packet. There was some opposition to that, and owners of the hookah lounge mentioned that this was not necessarily directly within their establishment, and that's also provided in your packet. So I've gone over the background. And Chair, going into the issues for today, I would say number 1 and number 2 is really an overview of informational, of providing the public safety. Happy to go through that, but I know we have our experts here that can, Police Department can provide more reflection and analysis of what their maps that have been provided and the data that's in your packet. And so happy to, we want to start there, or any other questions?
We can. Did they have a presentation, or you know? They did send, for the record, I guess it's called the heat map. Is that what it's called, Commander? That demonstrates pretty dramatically the issues that we're discussing today. That this is so. And
I can just highlight it just for the
Please.
record, so everyone's clear. You know, look on page 6, and so as mentioned, MCPD provided several informational data points and heat maps. Number 1 was the call for service, which was mentioned earlier. The downtown Silver Spring beat, close to almost 3,000 calls, and that was the highest amongst all the other county. There's also an arrest heat map as well, and that level shows you the high level of red. EGS, my understanding, that is the e-justice system, and that is recording an actual police report. And so looking at just the recent data, and I'm on page 6 looking at number 3, the number of weapons that were involved where there was a police report of hookah lounge was between 2 a.m. and 7 a.m. were 63 in 2002, 82 in 2003, and 14 so far in 2004, looking at January and
2023 and 2000.
Yes,
24. Only missed about a couple of years. Yeah.
Sorry.
We're paying attention.
I'm sorry. Let me say that again to make sure that's clear.
Yeah, please.
So everyone's following along. I'm on page 6 of the staff report. I'm looking at number 1, and then there's a sub 3. There's EGS incidents with weapons involved. First bullet point says the number of weapons involved near hookah lounge in downtown Silver Spring between 2 a.m. and 7 a.m. were 63 in 2002.
22.
63 in 2022.
Yes.
I'm glad
Thank you
you're
for
paying attention.
clarifying.
I'm just glad everyone's paying attention.
I didn't know if they could put the heat maps up while you were referencing.
It's in the packet.
Oh, I know it's in the packet, but I didn't know if the viewing public wanted to be able to see it.
Yeah. Anyhow, we'll do that after. Please,
Okay.
if you'll.
And so right now it's on circle 47 if you're looking through the packet, and so that's the clearest way. And so 82 reports in 2023, and 14 so far in 2024. And so that's just looking at the reports that were filed. There's a slew of other Looking at number 4, that talks about the calls for service at hookah establishments. This is actually by address. And so that was one of the things. Is it something across the street, or is this actually near the vicinity of where certain addresses are? And that's on Circle page 49. That data point specifically identifies the cumulative number of calls for service near that address. And once again, just looking at the numbers, there were 67 calls in 2022, 78 calls in 2023, and 10 calls in January and February of this year so far. The last point that was raised was looking at the hours of operation, and then how many hookah lounges are out there. And so according to that MCPD data, there's 13, and their publicly posted hours is up until 5 a.m. Two of them at least up till 5 a.m. But there are observations that publicly posted hours are not consistent with what's actually happening, and that they're actually operating until 7 a.m. in the morning. And so with that was some of the data provided that council staff received, and saw that there was a significant number of police resources allocated to that area to address and respond to the incidents near these late night establishments. And so with that, I want to stop there.
Thank you. And I did want to point out that, to the last point, that a hookah lounge could be open, doesn't have to close, I guess, the way our law is set up right now, so they're not in violation of any legislation. If this passes, which I'm supportive of that it should, that would change that. And so, to the earlier points, I think it's necessary to, just for those who might be interested, my background is small business. I was raised behind the counter, and I am someone who absolutely wants every business, small or large, to succeed. But I also know that they have to be a good neighbor, and that they have to work within the community in order to succeed. And when we know that Prince George's County has legislation that says that their hookah bars have to close, I believe it's 8 o'clock at night. This is much more, the word lenient. If this were legislation that does not work, we're going to have to consider what Prince George's County did, in my opinion. We're saying in this legislation, we want you to be successful, we want your business to prosper, but we want you to do it so that you're a good neighbor and a safe neighbor. So with that, I don't know, any other comments? Please.
So I just wanted to thank everyone for being here, and thank you to my colleague for introducing the legislation to host this work session today. I was surprised that we didn't have anyone from our business community here to talk about legislation that's directly impacting minority-owned businesses, when we have quite a few minority-owned, minority chamber of commerces here in the county. I don't know how we engaged or raised awareness to the chambers about this pending legislation that would impact businesses with a negative RESJ statement. Is there anyone that can speak to that?
I do want to correct the record that the RESJ statement was a positive impact, but
I think I'm referencing to the...
I'm sorry, maybe Councilmember
Vice President Stewart.
So, and the racial equity and social justice impact statement actually came back as a positive for racial equity and social justice. And Councilmember Sales, I'm happy to provide you, as I did with Ms. Pena and our OLO office, the dates, times, and names of businesses and individuals who we've met with. We, as I said in my opening comments, we did meet with the Ethio-American Chamber. We met with the Ethiopian Center. We also met with the Greater Silver Spring. And Jacob Newman of our Regional Services has also been collaborating and pulling people together. So. I'm happy to send you the dates and times and names of folks we've met with.
Yes, that would be great. I know we also have our Maryland Black Chamber that's been pretty active, and I was thinking about the economic impact statement for this legislation that stated it would negatively impact the county's economic conditions. I also had some questions about parts of this legislation that you may be able to answer. You know, we just spoke about the legislation that we passed a few months ago, the late night business safety plan. We haven't even seen that impacted yet, but I know that businesses were supposed to produce that plan. Can you tell me about the timeline those were due?
And I want to be clear that I didn't work on the late night safety plan bill, but I can talk about what's existing. And so what the council did under Bill 1423 was establish a framework that businesses would have to follow. A part of that was if there are certain calls that are happening, if there are 2 or more calls that you were required to do that, or if your business, I want to make sure I'm clear on when I say business because it's not everyone. I want to make sure I use the definition of defining business, and that's actually in the packet on page 3. But a business is other tobacco products retailer, a food license, a license for on-site cannabis consumption, or a liquor license where products are sold or consumed at tables. And so specifically for those businesses, they were required to provide that. Part of the legislation was regulations to be developed as well that would set the stage for what that plan should include. My understanding is that law is effective, but still subject to the regulations to guide businesses on what that plan should look like. It also provided a grant program as well for businesses to apply for if they needed assistance.
Cameras and...
Yes, and I want to be careful not going too far because I know it's new and I didn't personally work on that, but my understanding is yes.
Okay, thank you. So I just had a question because I know that, you know, we're trying to become a business-friendly community and promote ourselves as business-friendly, and so trying to further regulate how businesses operate without, you know, seeing how legislation we've introduced is actually working. I did circulate a memo to everyone present here to see if we could look at some ways to balance this legislation with efforts to do a sunset on the proposal to close the businesses a bit early. We've always been the blueprint for leading efforts to be more business friendly. We all just joined our council president for this jobs. Most of us joined the council president for the jobs initiative to introduce $20 million to promote how business friendly we are in the county. And so I don't think we would be taking cues from neighboring jurisdictions in Prince George's County. This legislation, I believe, just runs contrary to that initiative. And as I mentioned before, the economic impact statement for this bill even mentions that it would negatively impact the county's economic conditions. When we created the late night business task force, I would think that any area that's going to promote late night activities would accommodate an increased level of police presence as people are coming out of establishments. And so I wouldn't expect to correlate, you know, an increased call or an increased amount of staff time to accommodating when places of businesses are being let out. And so I did circulate an amendment. Hopefully I can get a second.
Are you making that in the form of a motion?
Yes, I would like to propose a formal amendment to put a sunset on this legislation so we can come back and reevaluate it the same way we are evaluating other initiatives, especially when we are thinking about, you know, our economy, especially the late night economy. I would hope that we could be a bit more understanding and make sure that the legislation we pass actually has the intended consequences of curbing violence. And so.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second? None appearing. Thank you very much.
All right, and I had a second amendment that I proposed because, this is a late night. We did have a late night safety task force. I'm hoping that as we are talking about ways to improve late night activity, we still need to see how these late night safety plans will work, that we reestablish the late night safety task force to ensure that the legislation we're passing, the late night safety plans, everything that we're doing actually works to advance safety in all of our late night areas.
And that's a motion as well?
Second, yes, that's a motion.
That's a motion. Is there a second for the motion? Also, no second for that.
All right.
Councilmember.
Thank you.
Thank you. I did want to point out that it's my understanding for the regulations for late night business safety plan, we're actually going to be having a work session and action on our regulations on Tuesday. And I see Ms. Frog shaking her head yes, so that means I'm right, or that she's right. And also, I did also want to point out about the economic part of this, is that, yes, it does anticipate that there'll be a negative economic impact on the conditions of these businesses, but it does not say that there's going to be a negative, because I can't know on how much of a negative impact we've had on other businesses because of that. So there again, we need to work through this. We want to have everybody prosper, everybody have a safe business, and continue. Any other discussions? Please.
Thank you, Chair Katz, for mentioning that, because I think that's a critical point. And I've been aware of this issue for many, many years from the Chamber of Commerce perspective, that there are many businesses that suffer from this activity. And so I was surprised with the economic impact statement, because it didn't take into consideration the other businesses in the community. So I look forward to voting for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lukey, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I want to thank Council Members Stewart, Albornoz, and Glass for bringing this and continuing to work on this issue, and always happy to support. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to co-sponsor. This, I know and we have many people sitting out here who have been working on this collaboratively over time, and so this is something that has had a lot of thought and a lot of care put into it on how best to bring parity, for example, with our neighboring jurisdiction in DC, and other issues that relate to, let's say, inspections of different things and making sure there's enforcement about businesses operating when they're supposed to operate and not operating when they're not supposed to operate. These are all things that we would have the ability to do moving forward once we do this, which we don't have right now, because there isn't a cutoff time in that way. So I greatly appreciate that. I also, appreciate the data that's been supplied, and as we've talked about previously in other hearings with the Public Safety Committee, attention to those who are being victimized by crime in the area, right? Because it's residents, it's visitors, but and I think one of the statistics was that of the homicide victims, they were all minorities. The victims of the homicides in that area were all minorities, and we have to remember to balance not just our economic development interests, but our safety interests, our people, our human-centered approach to things. And I greatly appreciate everyone working on this and continuing to keep eyes on the ball so that we make sure we're doing our level best to make things better. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mink.
Thank you. Just wanted to recognize the extensive outreach that went into putting together this bill, and clearly there's a lot of different layers to think about, and so it's clear why that extensive outreach was so important. So much appreciation to Councilmember Stewart for leading that work, and I think absolutely it makes sense to keep an eye on this, and I would assume that everybody would agree with that. So I don't know. I don't think we want to write in a sunset period that comes with other issues. But to the point that we want to keep an eye on this, I think that that's absolutely a valid point. It would be great to get over time to look at our breakdowns of of the calls and everything. It'd be great to get like hour by hour breakdowns, starting from before 2 a.m. and going after 2 a.m. and be able to compare those over time, as well as checking in with the businesses, the ones directly and indirectly impacted, and looking at their income over those hours. Are we seeing that revenue, hopefully for the hookah bars, is shifting to other times of day? And it'd be great to get, especially at the beginning of the implementation. I don't think we want to wait like a year to get that. So if we could do, work, and I leave this to Councilmember Stewart to figure out what makes sense here, but to think about what would make sense for a relatively quick timeline on starting to get some of that feedback in case there might be adjustments that do make sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Glass.
Appreciate the conversation, and the thoughts that have been raised. And Councilmember Sales, appreciate you acknowledging the Nighttime Economy Task Force, because I view this as an extension of that work. As a member of that task force 11 years ago, there were 32 recommendations that were made, and only one of them was related to the hours of late night establishments. The other 31 were about transportation and housing and arts and entertainment, and the ecosystem as a whole, and public safety. And the one that related to nighttime hours was about businesses with liquor licenses. And all this bill does is bring all businesses under the same standard. It is the most fair thing that we can do. Fair for the residents, fair for all the business owners, and fair for our public safety officials as well.
Thank you. Council Member Fanny Gonzalez.
The way I see this bill is also a continuation from last year's late night safety plan that we all worked on. For that particular bill, I was very active talking to businesses in my district, in Wheaton, in Glenmont, and at the end of the day, the way I see this piece of legislation, let me just add very quickly before I forget, thank you so much to Council Vice President Kate Stewart and Council Member Albornoz and Glass for working on this. I think this is a business-friendly legislation, period. Because at the end of the day, as I mentioned during the beginning of my comments, everybody want to have safe communities where you can go out and feel that you're gonna go there, but then you're gonna come back home safely. And this is what this is about. And so I look forward to seeing how this develops, keeping track on this, as Councilmember Mink mentioned, as we do in every single legislation anyway. We always keep track to see if it works or not, and fix it if it doesn't. That's part of the legislative process anyway. And with that, I look forward to voting yes on this.
Anybody else? No. No. Yeah, I checked that in. I did. Just for those who might not always know our system, we have a joint committee, and the joint committee group is allowed to make a motion. The others are good guests, and we always enjoy having them here, but Council Vice President Stewart and Councilmember Albornoz are guests today of the joint committee, so they cannot make a motion. And with that, would anyone like to make a motion?
I can.
What?
I can. I'd like to move that the joint committee support the legislation.
Before we move
Ms.
forward,
McCartney,
there are still two decision points.
have we gotten ahead of ourselves?
Take this as an answer. Go ahead, Elaine.
We're very excited.
Just a little bit more clean up.
Oh,
I just
you're
want
right. I do
to,
remember one I wanted to bring up. Yeah.
I want to turn your attention to page 9 of the staff report. There's an amendment to modify the restriction of operating hours for tobacco and vape shops. I want to be clear that this is regarding on-site consumption of smoking. And so if there's a vape shop that's just selling tobacco products, that's not the venue that we're trying to regulate. And so with that, council staff is recommending an amendment to the definition on lines 50 for it to read, tobacco shop has the same meaning as in section 24.9 and includes and instead of place, I want to say area or room that allows for on-site smoking of tobacco products. I just want to know if that's accepted.
Okay.
Do we need to move the amendment or just without objection?
Yep.
Okay, very good.
And then moving on to just page 10 there, a recommendation to amend the legislative findings. If you've noticed on lines 18 through 37, it actually cites the Baddock case. While it is still relevant and good law, we want to be able to use data that's actually relevant to Montgomery County. So the recommendation is to strike the actual case and replace it with language that says the number of police calls received as a result of late night establishments operating in the downtown Silver Spring area between 2 a.m. and 7 a.m. increased by 16% from 2022 to 2023, with the highest overall count of 2,974 service calls when compared to other areas in the county. And so the basis for this is using the data that supports Montgomery County and not necessarily the case that was actually cited.
I think, is that without exception? Yes. Thank you.
And lastly, I just want to raise that there were a couple of testimony about fees and charging additional fees or raising that. That's governed by state law, set by state law, and so the county is only limited to charge the fees, a Class A penalty.
Okay, good. Thank you. And I know that Councilmember Glass would like to make a motion.
I have one more motion to make based on conversations with members of the community and with some colleagues as well. I'd like to make a motion that this be considered expedited legislation.
That's right. Okay.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that this be expedited. All those in favor? Opposed? So that carries with one abstention. Yes. Opposition. And the overall bill. Did you want to make a motion?
Unless there's any other conversation, I'd like to move that the Joint Committee approve this bill.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? With one. This bill passes. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. And we are adjourned.
Thank you.